Back on the Reagan Lincoln theme, balancing the budget is a little like protecting your virtue. You just have to learn to say no. Ronald Reagan, 1982. Government is like a baby, an alimentary canal with a big appetite at one end and no sense of responsibility at the other. Our keynote speaker has a long and sterling career of holding people responsible. On January 1st, 2025, he became the 21st State Auditor of North Carolina. Born in Lincolnton, North Carolina, he's lived in Fayetteville, Durham, Edenton, Greensboro, Chapel Hill, Thomasville, Hickory, Boone, and Raleigh. He is a former prosecutor, a small business owner, and most recently worked as an attorney and served as chairman of the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees. Dave's legal career includes being an assistant district attorney in Cumberland County, where he prosecuted crimes in both district and superior courts, and as a litigator practicing in both the state and the federal courts. As chairman of the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees, he led the effort to eliminate the university's operating deficit and created the Board of Trustees' first ever Audit and Risk Committee. He and his wife Haiti live in Durham, Chapel Hill, and have 4 children. He is a Christian. He serves as an elder in his church. He earned an undergraduate degree from UNC Chapel Hill, and always improving and ameliorating. He thereafter matriculated and earned a master's degree in business administration and a law degree from Campbell University. Please welcome our auditor, Dave Boliek.
Thank you, Judge. Well, how's everybody doing? What a great meal. Now look, I get to go all across the state and eat at a lot of places and consume a lot of food. This is one heck of a meal, and they deserve a round of applause. That was a good meal. It is an honor to be here in this part of the state. Again, I am blessed as part of my job. I get the ability, and they make me travel around the state, which, I mean, that is a great thing, right? Because this is a great state. North Carolina's awesome. And I did want to say, though, on the way up here, I had a phone call from a couple of people that wanted me to send greetings of hello. One was a text, actually, because he's in Taiwan, and that is Commissioner of Labor Luke Farley, who wanted me to say hello. He's on a labor mission in Taiwan. And then Treasurer Brad Briner, I talked to him, and he wanted me to bring greetings on behalf of the Treasurer's Office. Look, I'm the North Carolina State Auditor, and I never in a million years would have thought that I would be saying those words, because, you know, I kind of knew we had an elected state auditor, but it's not really the sexiest job in the world, right? And there's not a lot of people that really know what the state auditor is or what the state auditor does. And I had the opportunity, Commissioner, to talk to the county commissioners across the state, the executive board, in Greenville a few weeks ago. And I gave a speech, and they invited me to dinner. And I went to dinner at the Town Bank Center there at East Carolina, and we sat at a table very similar to the one we're sitting at tonight. And I sat down and had a couple of young staff members beside me, and they're young guys trying to grow a little facial hair. You know, they're sitting to my left. I had a nice young woman sitting to my right, and she had a name badge on and said that she was the clerk of the county commissioners of the county where she lived. And so I asked her, I said, so tell me about your job. This is interesting. Now, keep in mind, She works for elected county commissioners. And she told me that she'd worked there for 25 years. And so I'm sitting there having this conversation, finding out about her day. And I thought to myself in the back of my mind, and mind you, you get elected statewide, you can get full of yourself pretty quick, right? And so I'm thinking, well, she knows who I am, right? Like, she knows I'm a state auditor. So I'm having this conversation with her. It's going pretty well, but we end up the conversation. She looked back over at me and she said, now, you said you worked at the state auditor's office? I said, yeah, I am the state auditor. She said, is that a family business? I said, kinda, I guess. She said, I was wondering if those two guys were your sons and were you training them to take over the business? I said, well, I don't know about that. I'll tell you that story for a couple reasons. One is nobody knows the state auditor, right? And we're working to change that. But two, as soon as you start thinking you are somebody, people in North Carolina turn you around real quick and tell you exactly where you stand. And I appreciate that. What are we doing at the state auditor's office? It has been a really, really interesting and fascinating ride over the last 10 months. I walked into office, I was sworn in on January the 1st. And I'll tell you a quick little story. You're talking about the Gettysburg Address is and again, that's a hard speech to follow. But I learn a lot every day about certain things. So when I got sworn in, I was actually sworn in alongside Treasurer Briner in the well of the North Carolina Senate. And when I was there on New Year's Day, I had some family and friends, not a real big group, but in walked Elaine Marshall, who's the Secretary of State, and she's got a book under her arm. And she kind of comes in, she's in there, and I said, Madam Secretary, I said, no, I'm glad you're here. I said, no offense, what are you doing here? It's January 1st. Don't you have somewhere better to be? I have to be here, is what she said. I said, well, all right, whatever. So I did my oath, and then once I was sworn in, she called me over. And I learned this, and this is just a piece of interesting history that I thought I would share with you. Every elected executive in the history of the state of North Carolina has had their oath handwritten by the Secretary of State. And she has these books. The Secretary of State actually has volumes of books that are kept in a safe at the Secretary of State's office. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. Along with that, the state auditor actually is administered 3 oaths of office. Not 1, not 2, but 3 oaths of office. The first oath of office is what all elected officials take, and that is an oath to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of North Carolina. And there is a statutory oath that goes along with all elected officials. And the auditor has a 3rd oath of nonpartisanship in the work that they do. I think that's really important with respect to the work we do. Now, I leave my party affiliation, even though I am a proud Republican, I leave that party affiliation at the door when we walk in the door to do the work on behalf of the state auditor's office. That doesn't mean that I'm leaving the fact that I have conservative beliefs and that I have an ideological view of the world at the door. But I leave the party affiliation at the door, and I think that's really important. It's been helpful to our work in the state auditor's office. We're trying really hard to redefine our mission, and that mission is to be effective and impactful to everyday North Carolinians, not to just deliver book reports. And I'm going to tell you a couple of things that we've been able to do. One, we started with what the Raleigh press likes to call my white whale, and that is the Division of Motor Vehicles. And I promised each and every one of you here, and many of you saw me on the campaign trail, promised that I would audit the DMV, and we began with an extensive audit of their IT services as well as the process of getting an actual driver's license. It was a 600-page audit, the most extensive performance audit ever performed by the Office of North Carolina State Auditor in the history of the State Auditor's Office. And I am proud to report to you that even as early ago as just about 10 days ago, my staff, I was actually out of town, I was in Washington, D.C., met at the White House with the legal counsel there on some issues about elections. But my staff delivered a report, and then right after that, the commissioner of the DMV delivered a report. And on their slide, they talked about the things that they were working on, and every single bullet point on their slide was taken directly from the audit that our office completed. And I will tell you, the reports from the DMV is that it's getting better, but I want to promise you this, I'm a dog with a bone on the DMV, and I'm not going to let it go. I told the governor and I told the commissioner of the DMV that I would give them to the end of the year to implement some of these things, and we would take another look under the hood after the first of the year, and that's our intention, to keep them on track, because I don't think it's too much to ask for government to deliver efficient customer service with the DMV. I mean, really? Right? Can I get an amen on that?
Amen.
Our legislature's working really hard. They have delivered on everything that the DMV asked for. This was an interesting point that we found in our audit is that the commissioner, former commissioner, and the former governor of the state had incessantly complained, and then you actually go back, and our audit reported this, they never asked the legislature for anything. They never went to the legislature and actually presented them with data to say, this is what we need because we need to go from A to Z, for example, right? They never did that, and that's in our audit. That is a finding in our audit that they just never bothered to go to the legislature and ask them. And what you find is our top line recommendation really is that the DMV needs to be separated from DOT. And that's because when DMV would go to the DOT and ask for things, DOT would cut them back because they had roads they wanted to build or other things they wanted to do, and it just wasn't compatible with what other priorities that the division of the Department of Transportation were. So that is a real concrete example of how we can be effective in the state auditor to get things done. I have a little bit of a bully pulpit. I can keep this on the front burner, and I'm going to tell you a couple other things we've done. City of Charlotte. And I know I'm here in Chowan County in eastern North Carolina. The city of Charlotte's 14th largest metropolitan area in the United States, and it is part of North Carolina. We've got a real problem with the big city mayor in Charlotte. I got a call, my phone blew up one afternoon, and our tip line blew up that Monday with information from citizens that the city of Charlotte had supposedly settled a proposed lawsuit with their chief of police, and it was for several $100,000. I made some calls to find out if there was any credibility to the texts and phone calls I was getting, and decided that there was. And I sent a letter to the city of Charlotte and to the mayor, and I said, listen, we're going to investigate you because I've gotten reports that you've settled with your chief of police on a proposed lawsuit, not even a filed lawsuit, a proposed lawsuit. And get this, the lawsuit was claiming a hostile work environment. Now I want you to unpack that sentence, that a chief of police has a hostile work environment. Think about that for a second and you'll get it. A hostile work environment from the chief of police, I mean, that's kind of your job, right? It's to deal with hostilities in the city. And I said, look, our position in the state auditor's office is, and we understand that you've done this and not told the public about the money that you have spent. You've not given any accounting of the money that you've spent. Our position is that any single expense of public dollars is the business of the public, period. 5 days later, they released the fact that they had settled with the chief of police for $305,000 behind closed doors. Folks, that's unacceptable. That's not the law. And I reminded the mayor when I met with her that that was not her money, that's the people's money. And, you know, interestingly enough, in her response to our final counting of that, which it turned out it was $305,000, we said in our findings, look, the city of Charlotte, the city council needs to follow the law and tell the public when they're spending the public's money. And she had enough nerve to give us in an official response, we'll think about it. So that bought her a second audit. So we audited the Charlotte area transit system with the tragic murder of Ms. Zaruska on that. And we're in the middle of a final report on just the contract to provide private security the city of Charlotte decided to use private security on their transit system instead of the police department. And in 2018, they contracted to provide 88 armed guards for a total price of $5.9 million per year in 2018. In 2022, post George Floyd, they decided they were going to cancel that contract, enter into a new contract that was completely set aside for Charlotte Business Inclusion, which is a DEI program in Charlotte, and that they were going to spend $18.4 million on 30 armed guards and 180 unarmed security personnel. Now, unarmed security personnel is customer service where I come from. And clearly that's a policy change, right? You can see in the actual administration of government there that there was a policy change in the city of Charlotte's view of how to do business. They went from 88 armed guards to 40% of the number of armed guards, right? Interesting part about that is no one had ever seen those numbers until we released that initial report.
Wow.
Because it's a private security contract which is shielded from public information. And we didn't release stuff that would put any kind of security guard in harm's way. But that's the type of public business that we have set out as our mission to take that look under the hood and let policymakers at the legislative level, the local government level know exactly what is going on. I can go on with a couple others. I will mention Elizabeth City. Of course, we just released an investigative report of the city of Elizabeth City. We've gotten several reports about Elizabeth City, and so decided to take a look under the hood. And one of the things we found was, there's really no other way to describe it, but fairly rampant spending on just everyday meals. With public money, and no procedure, process, or controls around how and when to use the city credit card. It's not really a credit card, it's called a P card, but it's like their debit card. And just not any procedures and controls around that. And the thing about it is, the first question I get, which is the right question, why is somebody going to jail for this? Well, if there's not a procedure or a policy in place, then there's no procedure or policy to break. Therefore, there's no violation of the law because you're not actually, that is a lack of institutional control in the city of Elizabeth City. And so that's what this initial report out of Elizabeth City, stay tuned on more, but I will tell you that is a rampant finding that we see all across the state of North Carolina. I could go on and 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 talk about this stuff. I never in a million years would think I would tell anybody that I'm jazzed to be the state auditor. But I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding for me to do it. I'm enjoying the job. We're getting some real results. I want to talk about elections before I leave, and I know I'm probably talking a little bit too long, but I know you want to hear about elections, and I want to tell you about elections. That's been an adventure. As many of you, just to confirm, to know, our General Assembly graciously moved the authority of elections from the governor to the state auditor's office. I'm very proud to take the reins of that. The consequence is that now all 100 counties in the state of North Carolina have a majority 3-2 Republican to Democrat at our local county boards. And we have a majority 3-2 Republican at the state board of elections. So what is that resulting in? And I'll tell you, look, we're moving actually, and I know it seems like we're not moving as fast as you want us to, but the state auditor actually just got control of the budget now 4 months and 5 days ago. It seems to me like it was 4 years ago, but it was just 4 months ago that we got control of the Board of Elections budget, and we moved fairly rapidly. In very first meeting of the 3-2 board, replaced Karen Brinson Bell as executive director. hired Sam Hayes, former general counsel of the North Carolina House of Representatives, who just announced today the hiring of some additional folks that I think you'll be very interested in. One is a gentleman who actually ran for state auditor now 8 years ago, Tim Hogemeyer, is the general counsel, a strong Republican general counsel of the State Board of Elections as of today. The spokesman, Pat Gannon, has now been replaced. Here's some claps on that one. And Henry Tyson, Judge Tyson, Appeals Court Judge Tyson's son, who formerly was with the Department of Insurance, is now the spokesperson for the Board of Elections. So we're making some moves on personnel. We have gotten rid of more than 100 of what they call these numbered memos, which was the way that the former executive director Bell managed the Board of Elections. Instead of using the North Carolina rulemaking process, she just created this, I don't know, this thing called a numbered memo and would send these things out. There were approximately 178 of these. We've eliminated, as of the 31st of October, more than 100. Our board just canceled them, just voided them. And we've now boiled the relevant numbered memos down to move them into what we call a rulemaking posture, which is really the appropriate way for government to operate. Poll observers, former administration read the law, I believe incorrectly. Had a couple of folks in the governor's office tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about, and I told them, I said, well, my law degree is just as good as yours, and said that nonpartisan municipal candidates could not have poll observers. I don't read the law that way. I don't believe the legislature intended the law to be that way. In fact, I know they didn't. We've done a rebuild the voter roll project to look at where those holes are. Look, some of this stuff is not really policy. Some of this stuff is just management 101, right? I mean, the former administration knew, not only from a lawsuit that was filed by the North Carolina Republican Party 2 years ago, but they certainly knew shortly after, a week or two after the final canvass of the Jefferson Griffin Allison Riggs race, that there were at least 60, but north of 100,000 voter entries that were not in compliance with federal law. Why would you not just go ahead and start working on cleaning that up, right? This is just management 101. Let's follow the law. So we've started that process. We've also are in the process of entering into a memorandum of understanding and agreement, which is why I was in Washington, D.C., meeting with the president's attorneys about running our voter rolls through what's called the SAVE database to check citizenship. It's time to make sure that we have citizen-only voting. And last week, we released something called a request for information, because we do have a voter system that I have confidence in the sense that we can run a fair and free election, but it was built in 1998, and it's time to modernize that system. So we issued a request for information because we want to be transparent with the process, and we want everybody over here, everybody over here, to tell us what they think a voting system should have, so that we can make sure that it is the gold standard for the entire country moving forward. Because as a steward of the taxpayers' dollars, and ultimately with the Board of Elections, I'm in charge of their budget and the spending of the money. As a steward of that money, I don't want to go to the legislators that are in this room and that represent people across this state and ask them for any dollar that we're not putting toward a system that is going to be the best gold standard for the entire country. We have an opportunity, and it's too good of an opportunity to waste. We don't need to do this half-baked. We need to do it fully, and so we're going to do it transparently, openly, and we released that RFI last week, and we've already gotten 800 submissions with information. So I'm really proud about that, because we want to take it in. We want to be transparent. We want to give people what they expect, in a system that has real integrity. And because look, voting is sacred in this country. It's sacred to us in this room. It's sacred to the Democrats across town. We might disagree with them, but voting is sacred to them too. And voting is sacred to the unaffiliated, right? And to the Libertarians and to the Green Party. It is sacred. It is what makes us North Carolinians and Americans. So we've got to make sure that our system has integrity. And that's my true commitment to each and every one of you and to the people of North Carolina to manage that system. So let me say this. How does all this matter? There's a couple things that I can tell you as your state auditor that I can confirm. One of the things is that while we have the ability, and thanks to the legislature of something called the DAVE Act, to look at things on efficiency, we are really blessed in the state of North Carolina to have a conservative General Assembly and to have had one for the last 15 years. And I say this as I go across the state of North Carolina because it's true. Look, we have a lot of assets in this state. We've got a rainy day fund that this General Assembly and the members of the General Assembly who are here established. Because when it rained in western North Carolina, guess what? We had the money to help and answer the call. We have the lowest overall tax rate in the southeast United States, which keeps North Carolina #1 in business 3 out of the last 4 years. We have got fantastic parks. We've got all kinds of great universities that our General Assembly has funded. We just released an audit on UNC Wilmington. I could go through the tuitions, extremely low tuition for the value that you get in return. But our General Assembly supplements just UNC Wilmington alone $232 million a year. That's what keeps that tuition low. Without that supplement, tuition doubles in North Carolina. And then I also sort of judge my own personal bank and my financial situation based on my credit card. You know, I look at it, what my bill is. We have a credit card bill in North Carolina because this state issues bonds. And the way we measure that is the per capita contribution for each of you in the state of North Carolina. You have a responsibility, metaphorically speaking, but you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is about $107,000 a person for the federal debt. Now, I will tell you that's down $2,000 since President Trump took office. But in North Carolina, your per capita responsibility on bonds is a whopping $430. Why? Yeah. Why is that the case? That's because we have a pay-as-you-go General Assembly that have been fine stewards of your money. And let me just ask you right now, I see Senator Hannick here, I see Senator Sanderson, I see Representative Goodwin here. They deserve a standing ovation for the work that they do. We are blessed in this state to have had that leadership for the last 15 years, which tells us, yes, this time next year, we've got to deliver results in the General Assembly to keep our legislature conservative. I'll leave you with a couple last thoughts. One is trust actually, even though we have all these other great assets, trust actually is the #1 asset that government can deliver to people. We have to be able to trust our government. If we don't trust our government, our way of life ends. It's just as simple as that. And that trust is frayed by some executive actions in the governor's office. It's frayed by these big city mayors like I just described. And that's where the job of the state auditor comes in. It's my job to hold folks accountable and to make sure that you know somebody's taking a look and keeping watch of what's going on so that you can have trust in the way your tax dollars are spent. How am I doing that? Well, I hired a young man, his name is Dave Fox. And Dave's a great guy. I know Senator Henning and Senator Sanderson know him. He worked for Senator Solry in Johnston County. We were walking across the street one day, to the legislature, and we were in a conversation, and I asked him, I said, you know, how do you think I'm doing in the job? He says, well, I think you're doing great. I said, well, what does the staff think? They said, well, they got some questions about you. I said, well, I bet they do. I said, well, what kind of questions they got? Well, I said, they got one real good question about you. I said, what's that? They said, is that guy ever going to stop coming into the office first thing every single day? And the answer is no. Every single day, I am going to be there on your behalf. I'm going to be professional. I'm going to be effective. I'm going to be efficient. I'm going to get impactful results for every single North Carolinian, because from my perspective, my job on your behalf, not only as citizens of North Carolina, but as Republicans, is to show all voters, regardless of how they're registered, that it is in fact the Republican Party and only the Republican Party that's qualified to manage and lead the state of North Carolina into the future. I am Dave Boliek. I'm proud to be the 21st elected state auditor, proud to be a Republican, and yes, I'm just getting started. God bless you. Thank you.